Okay, Tov. Couple things. First of all, tonight we're going to learn Le'ilu Nishmat, a woman named Alice, who's a friend of someone in this group who has passed away. So we're learning her memory. Shamash Aliyah, and of course for Fuashlema for all the psuim and all the people who physically and spiritually and emotionally are in need of refuah. Second question. This is and you can answer me offline. You could send me a message. I don't want to discuss it now. One person in the group said that they were having problems that when they would listen to my class live, that suddenly they would hear nothing for like 30, 45 seconds. And at the same time, they also said they had problems hearing me clearly. So I'm thinking it's a connection problem for that individual. I just want to know if any of you are experiencing any of those issues. Please send me a message and let me know that. I told him that since people have not been telling me that, I'm assuming that's not the issue, but what do I know? Okay, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to finish up the bracha having to do with Parnasah, the Barech Alenu bracha. Last week we talked about sgulot, things that one people can do that while they may not help for sure, but no one can tell you anything for sure, they may help to do them for your parnasah. At the other end of the spectrum are things that we might do, engage in, or whatever, that could potentially harm our parnasah. I had mentioned last week that one of the things that increases one's parnasah, according to the potential segula, is reading Pitum HaKtoret. And I said I was wondering a lot. I don't remember the reason behind it, but it kind of dawned on me. I'm almost sure, but I still haven't looked it up. But it dawned on me. If I'm not mistaken, the Gemara says that the family who had the secret of making the Ketoret were very wealthy. So that might be the reason. I just don't remember for sure. So these are some things, a couple of which we've actually spoken of in other classes over the last couple of years. And I'm sure you all remember that could potentially harm our parnasah. One is anger. Anger has, which I've talked about many times, has some very, very serious consequences on all kinds of levels. And one of which is in theory, again, there's nothing guaranteed here, in theory, can affect someone's parnasah. Disputes, which is a subdivision, I guess, of anger. Now, let me clarify that about means dispute. To have a dispute is a good thing sometimes, all right? I mean, you build something and I say you've encroached on my property and you say I have, and you say you haven't and you've done the right thing. We go to Din Torah. That's why there's a section in Shulchan Aruch called Choshen Mishpat, which deals with civil law and torts and damages of that nature. So disputes aren't necessarily a bad thing. So what is it really talking about? Those are disputes that are so beyond the pale, frivolous, and unnecessary. Common example. Unfortunately, it's a common example. You walk into shul, you have your seat, and someone's sitting in your seat. And you say to them, and I've had this happen to me, and I've seen it happen, unfortunately, many times over the years in different shuls. You're in my seat. Can you move? Or they just are rude about it. Now, most people will just, oh, I'm sorry, and move. And sometimes you get into an argument. Or you get into an argument. By the way, in shuls tend to be places where there are arguments. People tend to lose their minds in certain situations. Sometimes it could be something as simple as something happens in a store, or happens in the street. Just arguments that really are absolutely avoidable. So again, a monetary dispute is a legitimate thing. That's not going to affect your parnasah. Well, it will, depending if you win or lose a case. If it's brought. These kind of disputes are frivolous, things that are not necessary. Lying. Now, we already know from last week's Parshat Vayera, that sometimes what we call in English a white lie and for Shalom Bayit, is perfectly permissible. What constitutes such a lie or a mistruth, whatever the word is they use nowadays, is debatable. But outright lying, whether it's Genevat Da'at, the idea of making somebody think something is true, which it's not, sometimes the actual straight lie, also could potentially affect our parnasah. I'll discuss at the end of this list why these things might. Broken promises. Beginning of Parshat Matot. to try to do some memory. Kol asher yitzeh mipiv ya'aseh, and says lo yachel devaro, not that order. A person should not profane their word. Whatever you say, you should do, which is part of the reason we say on the other list, you should say Bezrat Hashem and Yirtzeh Hashem, God willing. When you say you're going to do something, if I say to you, I'll see you tomorrow at 2:00, that's a neder. Okay, it means I have to do it. So that's why you really should say Bezrat Hashem and Yirtzeh Hashem, beli neder, without an oath. So breaking one's promise, one's word, is very has long-term and other types of consequences. Loaning with interest. We know that a person may not loan a fellow Jew money and charge him interest. The whole idea of, wait a minute, what about banks? What about when you invest and all? Those are different situations which have what's called a heter iska, which is beyond the purview for tonight's discussion. But nevertheless, a very important area of halacha. But loan, just will take simple loaning with interest is a problem, cause a problem for parnasa, and not giving tzedakah, not giving people money who need money. That also affects our parnasa. Now, the last couple of items here on the list, you may be able to come up with a pretty logical reason why it could affect our parnasa. We know Hashem deals in this world with what's called midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Things are done with a balance. I'm making something up, which don't ever think that if you broke your hand, God forbid, this is why, that, if I steal something with my right hand and I end up tripping and breaking my hand, God forbid, chalila, right? Because there's measure for measure. That's the concept of midah keneged midah. So when a person loans with interest or doesn't give tzedakah, many times part of that reason is that they are feeling they're not going to get what they deserve in this world as far as money. I have to loan with interest. You're using my money. I could have used it at that time. That's the cost of money. And I should have more because of that. Or I don't get tzedakah because I say, well, I need that money. And if I give it away, I'm not going to have enough money. So it shows a lack of emunah. We show a lack of emunah when it comes to parnasah, when it comes to money, then in kind, in the sense, then that comes back to bite you, because maybe something happened to your parnasah. The other issues about anger, disputes, lying, broken promise has a lot to do with our speech, how we deal with people, how we communicate, how we relate to other people, and it harms the ben adam l'chavero. All these angers, disputes, and lies harm ben adam l'chavero, between our man and fellow Jew. And when there's a lack of, and that therefore brings a lack of peace, a lack of shalom. If I were to say to you that when you wake up tomorrow morning, you have an extra $1 million shekel in your bank account, I don't think there's a single person listening to my words here tonight that wouldn't be happy with that. And even if they have to pay tax on it, right? You're going to be happy with it. It's all of a sudden free money. But life doesn't work that way generally. But that would bring you a sense of peace, right? You have a lot more money than you thought you had. Look, I feel a sense of peace when I find a 5 shekel coin in my couch that fell out of my pocket. That's cool. So when you're bringing a lack of shalom, you're causing a dispute, you're causing a breakdown in the peace between man and his fellow man, then Hashem is not so inclined. Again, we're talking right now all hypothetically, because no one can tell you this for sure. Inclined to want to bring shalom into your life, into that person's life who's causing a dispute or lack of shalom. Now, on these last couple, I mentioned that part of the lack of emunah is, well, wait a minute, I don't have emunah that I'm not going to have what I'm supposed to have. So this whole concept of davening for parnasah, davening for income, seems to go against a very clear Gemara. The Gemara seems to tell us very differently. Why in the world am I davening for parnasah? Why? What's the problem? So we look at a Gemara in Masechet Beitzah. It says as follows: Kol mizonotav shel adam kitzuvim lo merosh Hashanah v'ad Yom HaKippurim. This past Rosh Hashanah, just over a month ago, it was determined that I, Zev Shandel, at the beginning of Tafshin Pei Vav next year, will have X amount of money in my bank and in my pocket. It's already decided. Right? So between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur this year, Hashem already decided what I'm going to have. So if that's the case, why am I davening for parnasah? So let's make first, there's one exception. Let's look at the next slide. There's one exception to this, that it's not included in that big cheshbon or that accounting. Chutz mehotzaat, hotzaot Shabbatot, hotzaot yomim tovim, with the exception of the money you spend on Shabbat and on Chag, the hotzaot banav letalmud Torah, and the money you spend to teach, like for teachers and Torah, tutors and tuition. She'im patach pichet pochatino. If you skimp, you spend less, then you're going to get lower amount for that money you're supposed to get. But if you spend more than what you maybe can afford sometimes, or more than you anticipated, but you can still afford it, then the more you spend, the more it's going to come back to you in your parnassah. So first, before I come to the big question, let's just talk about what this means. Let's make the assumption that on Rosh Hashanah, it was determined I'm going to have, let's make it an even number, 1,000 shekel in the bank at the end of the year. God forbid, only 1,000 shekel in the bank. So, and during the course of the year, I make money, I lose money, I may spend money. So whatever happens eventually at the end of the year, I'm gonna still have 1,000 shekel. Well, what happens if I decide I'm gonna make this big Oneg Shabbat? I'm gonna spend 10,000 shekel, right? Does that affect the amount at the end of the year? I mean, there's X amount. I'm guaranteed, so to speak, for Rosh Hashanah. Answers the Gemara, no. As a matter of fact, when it comes to the money you spend on Shabbat, money you spend on Chag, the money you spend on learning Torah, the more you spend, the more it's going to come back to you. It's an investment in your future. So first of all, when it comes to parnassah, if you want to increase your parnassah, again, you're not going to know what you were supposed to have versus what you end up with. It's not like you don't get a little post-it note that says at the end of the year, oh, you did well, you got an extra 16,000 shekel because you spent all that money. But do understand that it's very clear in the Gemara that when you spend a little bit more on Shabbat, not even more, what you spend on Shabbat, what you spend on Chag, what you spend on learning Torah, then it comes back to you. We learned in Pirkei, we haven't learned it yet. Maybe we did, I don't remember anymore. Shlach lach machal pnei hamayim. Yeah, we did. Cast your bread upon the waters, because eventually it's going to come back to you. Okay, so and there's multiple explanations of what that is, and we talk about that in the class. But in this case, it's also when you spend the money, when you invest money, you're getting something out of it as well when you're spending money Shabbat and Chagim. But it still begs the question of this prior slide, if it's true that all your money and your income is determined already at Rosh Hashanah, why do I have Barech Alenu? Why do I have it in the first place in Shemona Esrei? So you could say, okay, so really we talked about the fact that it's about relationship with Hashem, getting closer to Hashem, all that's true. And it's talking about the idea that from the earth we see that Hashem is pleased with us when we see things growing. But Tachlis is still about Parnassah. Right? You can't take that away from us. So if you remember all the way back, I think it's February of last year, and when we first started this class, we talked about this question in general. And that is, why daven for anything? If Hashem knows what we need, and Hashem also can see the future, because to him it's not the future, it's already determined, right? If I am going to have, I don't want to say if there's a person, God forbid, who's going to be sick 6 months from now, then saying, davening for health, that's not going to help me. I mean, it's already predetermined. All these things are predetermined. It seems they're predetermined at least. Although here it's just telling us that only the person's parnassah is predetermined. But we also said that a person, whether they live or die, maybe that's predetermined on Rosh Hashanah. So the general idea, the general answer for this is as follows. It applies here, it applies in other areas as well. Let's assume for a moment there was a decree that Mr. Cohn is going to have at the end of the year 1,000 shekel. Why? Well, normally he would have had 150,000, but he's not been a good person. He's been doing this, and part of his redemption of this world, and part, unfortunately, is his nisayon is being tested by having not enough money. He's only going to have 1,000 shekel. Fine. Rubber stamp of gushpanka, it's Aramaic for like I don't know how you say it in English even, like a seal of approval almost. But what happens? Middle of the year, guy's thinking to himself, first of all, he doesn't know Hashem made that decree. But he's starting to think about what he did the last year. And it's after Rosh Hashanah, it's after Yom Kippur. So, you know what? I messed up last year. I really need to change. So what happens? This Mr. Cohen makes changes. The Gzerah is still out there, but it's not on him anymore because that Mr. Cohen is no longer the same person. He's changed, he's grown, he's doing tshuva, whatever it might be. So now when he davens for more parnasa, then he gets more parnasa because he's no longer the person who was going to get only the 1,000 shekel because of problems in the past. That's part one. Part two, if it's already this, I didn't clarify this question before. Let me make it clear, even deeper question. If it's determined that I'm going to have 1,000 shekel in the bank at the end of the year, why should I bother working? It's already determined. I'm going to have 1,000 shekel. So I'll wake up on the last day of Elul this year, and I have 1,000 shekel in the bank. I'll stay home in bed. I'll sleep more. I'll read. I'll learn. I'll go for a walk. I'll go on YouTube and watch videos. I don't need to work. I don't need to make any money because it's only going to be set. So we know that that it doesn't work that way in this world. That what Hashem has in store for us, we are partners. We are obviously a minority shareholder. We are an infinitesimally small shareholder. But we know it also says that Hashem says when it comes to tshuva, but it applies across the board. We open up an opening the size of a needle, he'll open up like a big giant hall. As we have to do our part, what we know in Hebrew, it's known as hishtadlut or hishtadlus, putting in your effort. Nothing comes for free. We have to put in our effort. If it's predetermined that I'm going to be the prime minister of Israel, no, it's not what I want. Thank you. I got one vote there. Although I would not mind being the prime minister for 1 hour, take care of what I need to do. I'd have enough time to do what I want to do and also time for a coffee break. Wouldn't take very long to make certain commands. Then what do I need to run a campaign for? I'll just sit home and I'll wake up, and the next day after elections, I'll be the prime minister. Again, we have a partnership fiduciary responsibility. We have a job to do. We have to do our part. A child that grows up in a very wealthy family. And I've seen over the years many, Baruch Hashem, many families who have a tremendous amount of money. I've seen families who have it first generation and families who've had it now that's already third and fourth generation, meaning what's called old money and new money. And there's a difference. You can actually see differences in families. And sometimes what happens, the parents make decisions that even though their kids can have everything handed to them on a silver platter, nevertheless, they are going to make them get a job babysitting or do something. Why is that? Why do you think, 1 second, here. I'm going to take this off the screen share for a second. And so why is it that they tell their kids to go out and babysit or to do something? They're still going to get their, $1 million trust fund, whatever they're going to get. Trust, I mean that literally. I know a man who was able to had multiple kids, each one years ago when they were little, opened up a trust fund for each one of them $1 million that they get only access to at 18 years old with all sorts of conditions. And they did have to do certain things. They didn't just sit there and become like freeloaders off their parents. Because again, the parent is trying to instill, by the way, it's not all across the board. The parent is trying to instill a sense of value. It's not an entitlement. If we didn't have to do anything, the bon nagid that Adam HaRishon didn't eat from the Eitz Hadat, and there was no the thing of by the sweat of your brow, you're going to have to eat, and everything came. It would be a very different life, obviously, for all of us. We wouldn't understand what it even means to have to put in the effort. But that's not the reality. Reality is since the time of Adam HaRishon, since Adam, we have to do our part. And that's the same thing here. That even though it may be predetermined, it's based still on our involvement. And things can change. Things can change for the good, but they can't change for the bad. What does that mean? If Hashem made a decree that something good was going to happen to somebody, Even if that person turned out to be a no goodnik and he's not good and he becomes a sinner and all that, the good is still going to happen because whatever Hashem determines for the good is always going to happen. The bad is the opposite. That Hashem makes a decree, but if a person changes, that bad goes elsewhere. Maybe it goes to somebody else. It flies up into Alpha Centauri. I don't know, but it's not going to come to that person. So that's our involvement. That's what we have to do. I have here, let me put it back on the screen. I'm not sure I'm going to read it or not. Let's see. So I will in a second. So what the whole issue is that a person gets worried that somebody else is going to have their money, right? If I do this, then they're going to have the 50 shekel that I was supposed to have. Or it doesn't work that way. Now, it does work that way in business, meaning if I sell you a product that I charge you 50 shekel for, your 50 shekel now becomes my 50 shekel. I'm talking about where a person's going to cheat in business because I want to become my money. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't help. So I'm going to read you a story. Okay, it's a mashal, a parable. I'll read and translate. Ma'aseh Yehudi sheba lifnei Hagon HaKadosh divrei chaim mitzaz. Tzanzer Rav Halberstam. A Jew came to him, Rav Chaim Halberstam. Li'itonen al chavero shepatach mulo esek mitchareh. That someone came and opened up a store near him. There was a competitor. And he was causing problems for his parnasah. Now let's step back for 1 second. There is an inyan, there's an issue in halacha of what's called hasagat gevul. If I have a pizza shop, and if I want to open a pizza shop, I cannot open up a pizza shop next to the makolet because there is a pizza shop there. So I would hurt his business. There's X amount of distance I have to do it, unless mine's different. He doesn't make deep dish pizza. He doesn't sell French fries. He doesn't sell whatever. So if I want to do that, it's not a direct tacharut, it's not direct competition. So I can do that. But if it's the same thing, I can't. So we're obviously talking about somebody who's in a neighborhood, but it's not in such a way that it's halachically wrong. So he's worried about somebody opened up a store near his, it's a similar stuff, and he's going to hurt his parnasah. Shal harabi. So the rabbi asked him, Vadai nasata pam be'ekala. Obviously, you've at least once traveled in a carriage. Amar vadai rabbi. Pamim rabot. Many times I've traveled in a carriage. Orata tasus el nahar lishtot. And did you stop by a river once, or to allow your horse to drink? Kain Rabbi, yes, Rabbi. Haim samta lev lachach. Did you pay attention? Shelifnei shu shoteh hu boet benahar beraglav hakit viot. Did you happen to notice that as he's about to lean into the water, into the river to drink, that he first uses his feet, his hoofs, to mush the water, like to shake it around? The man was shocked. Actually, that was true. And he actually never paid attention. And he's thinking like, yeah, you know what? Come to think of it, every time I bring my horse to the water, he's about to drink and he mushes his feet in the water. Wonder why? So the rabbi answers, it's actually very simple. When the horse, let me make this a little bigger. When the horse puts his head down towards the water to drink, he sees his reflection in the water, looking back at him, so to speak. And he thinks it's a competitor horse. He's worried that that's another horse who's going to steal that clear, beautiful water he's about to drink. He's afraid. He's afraid there's not enough water for both of them. So what does he do? He kicks the water, the river. So that the water will get all like dirty. As the dust, the stuff on the bottom of the water will get kicked up. The other horse will go away. He'll disappear. The guy laughed. The guy who was asking the question, he laughed. So the Rav continued and said, do you understand? Not only does that second horse only appear in the imagination of this horse, and not only that, even if that other horse really did exist, there was definitely enough water in the river for both of them. But when he tries to chase away that other supposed horse, he only gains one thing. What's he going to eat or drink? Water that's all filled with boats and redfish, all the stuff that he kicked up from the bottom of the river. Now that's what he's going to drink. It's opposed to drinking clear, pure water that would have been there when he just go to drink. He says at the bottom, it's hard to see. No one is able to touch somebody else's parnasa and benefit from it. In other words, but the bottom line is you get what you deserve. He gets what he deserves, and you're not going to be able to affect his parnasa again, except through regular business transactions. It's not going to hurt another person. Yes, Arya, you wanted to ask something? Yes, take yourself. It'll be unmute you. You can unmute yourself. You see how to unmute?
Is it audio? I
can hear it, yeah.
Approximately 40 years ago, somebody opened the first chocolate chip cookie store in Israel. Okay? Had never been such a thing as chocolate chip cookies till 41 years ago. Okay? Instead of letting him make a parnasa, 6 different guys in the same downtown central Yerushalayim copied him. And they all went bankrupt. Now you have chocolate chip cookies all over, but before this time, there was no such thing as chocolate chip.
Right.
Okay? You have to be like a dinosaur like me to remember that. Okay?
Okay.
But like that's Hasagas Gavul. Each one was trying and like all went under.
Right. That's exactly right. The classic Hasagat Gavul, thank you for that, is when I have a property that butts up against yours, and I move my fence, my gvul, my border, into your property. So I encroach on your property, and I take it. So I will tell you that when we sold our house in Chicago, and anyone sells your house, at least I know in the United States, you have a survey done, and the survey has to show that what you're selling is your property. Because what happens if over the years I move my fence a few inches to my neighbor's lawn, right, or yard? So now what I'm selling is really his property, and then the sale is no good. So that's the classic Hasagat Gavul. I've moved the Gavul, I've moved the border of my property. But it works when it comes to business. And the proof is right there that when everyone tries to do that, by the way, and I can tell you from my own history, that in the Chicago Rabbinical Council, that the Beit Din there has dealt with, that's a common case that comes up in business. One person opens this restaurant, the one opens this restaurant, that they are considered a competitor, and they have to show that they're different. So it's a common case that happens a lot about Beit Din around the world. But unfortunately, like you say, everyone wants to take a piece out of it, and they all lose. And that's what we're talking about here. It is like what hurts Parnasa is that kind of stuff. Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll put you back on mute now. Okay, so now that covers a lot of what I wanted to do on this. Let me just see if there's another one. Hold on. I think that was the end, because the next is the next bracha, I think. What we're doing next. Oh, no, I'm going to read this to you. I came across this. I translated it into English. This is not necessarily agreed to by everybody. I can't remember off the top of my head the Peleoids, what his name is. The Peleoid says as follows. There are 3 kinds of decrees. One type of decree could not be helped by Tefilla, which means that even after one does everything he can to get rid of it, it still remains. And what it is, I don't know, it could be a death, God forbid, it could be a lack of parnasa, it could be an illness, whatever it is, but there's one kind. And we're talking about, obviously, decrees from Hashem. Another decree is meant for a short time and will be taken away even without Tefillah. So let's say, God forbid, someone's sick, and for whatever reason they had to be sick. Or the decree was this guy's going to get lost and may end up saving his life. Or, as I mentioned before, the story of the Gidon Ariel's son, should live and be well, that he was hit by on his bicycle, and when he was I think it was 8, and they discovered something in his head, in his brain, as a result that they would never have discovered. So these things, that like a short time, it goes away without tefillah. I'm sure they daven from back then. Third decree, this is what we've been talking about, is set and will only be rescinded if one davens that it should be taken away. But how do I know it's a decree? How do I know? One should therefore view himself as being in this third category. Should always daven, especially since most decrees fall in this category. In other words, I'm making up a number now because I have no idea. 97.329%, nice round number, of decrees from Hashem fall into that last category, which means we should always be davening for parnassah, for health, and for freedom, and for all these things, because the God could be a decree against us, singular, us, plural, that we need to get rid of. So, and I think it's also important to mention one more line, which we've mentioned before in other contexts. Even if a sharp blade, sharp sword is sitting on your neck, you should never give up hope, never give up davening. We should always see that that tefillah can help. It always does. We don't always reap the benefits ourselves. Sometimes someone else reaps the benefit of our tefillah, but it should never be overstated. I heard a shiur years ago, I don't remember from who, maybe it was Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, I don't remember. He says, how come people sit in the doctor's office, in the waiting room, religious people who, they daven 3 times a day, do mitzvot and all that, keep Shabbat, and they're sitting there, the doctors, and they go in to visit the doctor, get a medication, and they say, oh, I really hope this medication works. It's fine, there's nothing wrong with saying that. But kind of leave Hashem out of the equation. I really hope this medication that Hashem sent through the doctor is going to work. There's daven to Hashem that the medication works. You don't say, oh, I hope this medication works, because it's not the medication that's curing you. It's Hashem, right? The doctor, the medication are only shlichim. They're the messengers of Hashem. And you're davening that not the medication should help, but the shaliach, that the medication and the doctor, the shaliach, the messenger of Hashem should cure you. It's a mindset, and how we have to start to think. Tov, we are going to segue into the next bracha. Now you'll notice that I have 2 pictures here. One is the obvious one, Tekabe shofar gadol lecherutenu. It's blow the great shofar for our freedom, which we're going to see the bracha in a minute. The other one is a weird picture. What exactly am I showing you here? So I'm going to first look at the bracha and the translation. I'm going to come back to the slide and understand what I'm showing you. This is the slide. The bracha. Tekah b'shofar gadol lecherutenu. Sound the great shofar for our liberty, for our freedom. V'sanes tekabetz galuyotenu. And raise a banner to gather our exiles. V'kabetzenu yachad, and gather us together me'arba kanfot ha'aretz, from the 4 corners of the earth. And I'll explain later why I have the word aretzenu, or to our land, in parentheses. Baruch ata Hashem mekabetz nidchei amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, Hashem, the one who gathers those who are dispersed. So, I cannot tell you, and maybe some of you also think this is the translation, that the word nes here means miracle. Like make a miracle and people should come back to maybe to Israel. It doesn't even say Israel in the bracha. So that's not what it means. And nes, in this case, means a banner. So take a look here. That's what I'm showing you here. When people go out to war, they come with a flag, or they come with some kind of a stanchion. There's a couple other fancy words, like a banner. Okay, so this bracha is talking about 2 things, multiple things actually, but blowing a shofar of some sort. We don't know what, and some kind of a banner. What exactly? So it's kind of unclear exactly what we're talking about in this bracha. We're gonna see. If I were to ask you, what do you think the bracha is about? 99.999% of people would say, and rightfully so, would say it's about the ingaranting of the exiles to Israel. The problem with that is, you'll notice I put the word le'artzenu in parentheses. The Nusach Ashkenaz, for the most part, does not say anything about Eretz Yisrael. Usually just that word doesn't appear in almost any Nusach Ashkenaz Sidur. Almost any. It's added in by Nusach Sfard, and Adot Mizrach says Artzenu. But this, without it, it just says to gather the exiles from the 4 corners of the earth. Right? It doesn't gather us together. It doesn't say anything about Israel. So that's strange. Why would that not be like part of the formula? So that's one thing. What we're going to do is look at a few questions with this bracha. because this bracha really does raise a whole bunch of questions to us. Because as I say, if you read it, again, one of the things I like to do in this class and in every class I teach is to take things that we say all the time or we read all the time or we learn all the time and say like, wait a minute, I never realized that. And that's one of these kind of things, this bracha. Just before this class, I was teaching a girl in Kita Zion, and she's learning Parashat Breshit. And I said to her, by the way, because she was having a test, I said, by the way, it says Vayerev Vayivoker Yom Sheni, Vayerev Vayivoker Yom Shlishi. It was evening, it was morning, second day, it was evening, morning, it was the third day. But the sun and moon weren't created until the fourth day. So what does it mean there was morning and evening? Or it was Erev and what is that? She goes, like this. This is her look like, what? Like, I never thought about that. Because we just get used to it, right? We read it, wrote, it was evening, it was morning, and we say, oh, wait, God didn't even invent. That's why I did a whole year for women's past Shabbat on this kind of stuff, things that we don't think about when we say. And that's one of the things about this bracha. Yes, this bracha happens to be, let's just jump to the end for a second. Yes, in general, it's about kibbutz galuyot. That's what the name of the bracha is, the ingathering of the exiles. And yes, ultimately mean to Israel. But it's more than that. It's much more than that. People who live in Chutz La'aretz, who live outside of Israel, who want to make aliyah, and this used to be something I would do many years ago. When I made aliyah, when you say like, okay, where in my bracha, in my Shemona Esrei, should I daven for me to have the strength to make aliyah, me to be able to convince my family or whatever it might be? It's this bracha, because that's what this bracha really is. This bracha is about kibbutz galuyot, the ingathering of the exiles. But on the surface, that's not what the bracha says. Again, let's just take a look at it one more time. I don't want to beat a dead horse, so to speak. But it just says, look in English, sound the great shofar. Wait, we're going to talk about the other questions in a minute. Sound the great shofar for our liberty. Really, the better word is freedom. And raise a banner together our exiles. Gather us together from the four corners of the earth. Blessed are you, Hashem. Gather the dispersed of his people of Israel. Or people Israel. There's no mention of the land of Israel. Your assumption is that it means in Israel. But wait a second. Even if it does mean Israel, why leave it out? If that's its point, why leave it out in Nusach Ashkenaz? Why is it not there? Does it mean if we all gathered and had followed Herzl's suggestion of the Ethiopia plan that we'd all be, that we, God forbid, that we'd all should just, as long as we gathered together in Ethiopia, that would have been great also. I want to see, I got a question here. Could the cover show be subject to Goyish editing? Question was, could Kabbalah Shofar be subject to non-Jewish editing and that cause these changes here? There is a one bracha we will deal with, which is V'lamal Shinim, which was, but not that the non-Jews edited it, but that we edited it for that reason, which we'll see. But this one, not that I know of. It's a good question. So let's take a look at some of these questions. Right? I put them here. Number one. The bracha blessing uses very poetic language to describe how God will gather us together. He will blast on a shofar, set up, that was the word I was looking for before, a mast or a standard around which we will gather. Why? Why not merely request he gather us together? What's this whole business of the shofar and the mast / banner? Number two, what does it mean he will blast on a great shofar for our freedom? The blessing is not about slavery or freedom. What is the connection between ingathering and freedom? Number three, what does it mean a great shofar? Just say if for some reason the shofar needs to be here, so say Tekabeh shofar l'cherutenu, blow the shofar for our freedom. Last question, next slide. The word in the Chatima, remember the Chatima of the Bracha and Shemona Esrei is the final part, like Baruch Atah Hashem, Mekabetz Nidchei Amo Yisrael. He is the one who gathers the ingathering. Is translated as dispersed. When we say nidachenu, is dispersed, but it doesn't mean dispersed. If you look at most English translations, it'll say dispersed, but it means really displaced. In fact, it suggests the presence of a force which is pushing somebody out where he should be. For example, we know that there's a pasuk we say in Musaf. There's a song. I'm not going to sing it. Which is that the lost ones of the land of Ashur shall come, and the Nidachim of the land of Egypt, which mean the displaced people of Egypt, and will bow down to God on the holy mountain Yerushalayim. Why are the dispersed people described in this manner, this bracha? Why are they called displaced and not dispersed? So these are all the questions we want to raise. I'll take it off screen share now for a bit. Okay, let me get here my notes. Okay. I'm going to address a general issue with what this bracha is about, and we'll get much more specific Bezrat Hashem next. I'm going to back up a step. If you look at Megillat Esther, you will see two sentences, two psukim, that complement each other with an I, not an E. They complement each other as follows. Or with an E, I don't remember. I get it backwards, maybe. Haman HaRasha goes to the king and says the following: Yeshno am echad mifozar u'muforad bein ha'amim. There's this one people who are spread out all over the place. V'datot shonot mikol am. V'datehem shonot mikol am. And their rules, their laws are different from any other people. And therefore, and it's not worth to keep them, and they should be destroyed. And then the story proceeds and proceeds and proceeds. And then the moment that Esther HaMalka, Queen Esther, finds her voice, we know that she doesn't do any talking. Everything's done to her and said for her until a certain turn of events. And this is not a shir in Megillat Esther, so that's another time. She says the following. She says, Lech kenoset kol hayudim, betzumu alai shloshat yamim. Gather all the Jews together and let them fast for me. She wants to go in to king. She's afraid that he's going to have her chop her head off because she doesn't go without permission to go into the king. She has to have an invitation, and she's worried. So she says, let's fast for 3 days. Hence, we have, generally speaking, the Tanit Esther, the fast of Esther on Erev Purim. At least it's Erev Purim outside of Yerushalayim. And we do that, we fast. But what does she say? She doesn't just say, tell everyone to fast. She says, Lech kenoset kol hayudim, gather all the Jews together. What is it that Haman said about the Jews? They were all spread out. They are mifozar u'muforad. They are disjointed. They are lack of unity. What is the antidote? What is going to make things get better for the Jews? Achdus, unity. That's when it's going to change things. That's the first thing that Esther makes a decision, so to speak. And she says that the only way we're going to solve this is if we stop our infighting, we stop all that. Unfortunately for the Jews, for centuries, it's not new now during this war, and it's not new, it wasn't new during the Holocaust, it wasn't new. This has been going on for centuries. That the one time we truly show, for the most part, true unity is when things are not good. That's when we come together. So I saw today, someone posted a Zionist Jew and an anti-Zionist Jew walk into a bar, and the bartender says, we don't serve Jews. What was the point? So it doesn't make a difference. Ultimately, we're still looked at the outside. We're Jew, right? That's the one thing I've said, that the only thing that Hitler, Yimach Shemo, got right, which is that he understood that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. We don't get that still sometimes. Unfortunately, very often we don't understand that. So that the antidote for problems in the Jewish people is unity. Yes, we need to vanquish our enemy and everything else, but we have to work on our own unity. That's what this bracha is going to be about. It's going to be about achdut. It's going to be about unifying the Jewish people. It's going to be much more than that, but it's going to show also, when we talk about it, when we get into it a little bit more next week, Bezrat Hashem, a little bit deeper, and what are going to be the benefits of that kind of achdut. We'll see next week, Bezrat Hashem. In the meantime, I want to wish everyone a good evening, a Shavua Tov, and it's supposed to theoretically rain tomorrow, which is be the first real rain of the season. We should have a good wet season. It should be raining every night and dry and sunny and beautiful every day. That's a nice thing to do, I hope. If not, then it rains during the day. It's also bracha, Bezrat Hashem. All right. Laila Tov, everybody.
Thank you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.